Alrighty, guys. So let's get to it. So today we're going to spend almost the entirety of our time talking about the mechanical elements of animation. And there's a bunch of things that we need to discuss today. So I'm happy that the live stream is working. I apologize for the delay, but I think this is going to act and serve as a really important, if not critical, resource going forwards, as almost the entirety of the foundation that we're going to be leveraging over the next number of weeks is going to be built today. So this is an important conversation. There are a lot of ways to do animation. There are a lot of ways. One of the things that we're going to focus on are some of the old school ways of animation while we learn the basics and the principles and some of these techniques. These old school ways of animation, meaning the kind of traditional cell-by-cell, hand-drawn animation, allows us to focus on the principles. It allows us to slow down and look critically at what we're drawing and ensure that what we're drawing is being infused with the quality of life that we're ultimately trying to achieve. Okay? So it forces us to slow down. And at times that's going to be difficult because you're going to want to go a million miles an hour. You're going to want this is going to be the assignment's due at 1:15 on Thursday. You have started it at 10:45 Thursday morning. You don't have too much time left, and unfortunately, you're working with a very slow medium. Okay, we're not always going to be working inside this traditional cell animation pipeline, but I want to start here. In addition to forcing us to slow down and critically think and analyze what we're drawing and what we're creating, it also kind of reminds us of where we've come from and where we're going. A lot of the core foundation ideas of what we do in the animation industry in this very moment is built upon a foundation that was set around the turn of the century. Okay, so we're going to start with the kind of the legacy way, and then as we get more comfortable with the animation process, we'll start incorporating some other tools into the mix. Everything that we do for the first couple of weeks is going to be done in Photoshop. Now, the reason I'm doing this is that it gives us an opportunity to very, very quickly iterate, right? So on one hand, it allows us to slow down, but on the other hand, it's a medium that allows us to quickly see the final result. If we were to draw every single one of our frames, as we were talking about earlier, and then photograph them in a stop-motion kind of realm, how long do you think that would take?
Too long.
Hours and hours and hours just to do one assignment, right? In an academic environment like this, we just don't have that time. You don't have that time. I don't have that time. And we certainly don't have 30 of those animation cameras chilling in the corner that every single one of you guys can use. Okay. We do, however, have a lot of computers that we can use going forward and to utilize our animation software. Okay, I'm just looking around. Do we have any open machines? They're all closed right now. So Jose and Raphael, hang with us as much as you can. Okay, during the lab, if you need to go over to the design lab and do your work over there, that's fine. Okay, that's no problem. Okay, all right. Questions or comments before we get started? Okay, cool. We're going to be doing all of our initial animation inside of Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is a great tool. Where do you see people using Photoshop? Photographers use Photoshop all the time. Why?
Enhances their photos.
Enhances their photos, right. It's an image editing application. It's purpose-built. That was the original purpose for Photoshop, was to take an image and alter it somehow. Photoshop's toolset has grown over the years, and it now includes a really cool animation system. Is it the best? No, it's certainly not the best. There are others out there on the industry that do a far superior job, but it does it well enough. Okay, I like focusing on Photoshop initially because Photoshop, in every sense, is the common denominator. Everyone in our world uses Photoshop. All the creative arts use Photoshop in one capacity or another. Doesn't matter if you're a photographer, a web designer, an animator, a 3D artist, you're going to use Photoshop. So it's an important skill to learn. We're going to be focusing our attention today on the basic fundamentals of Photoshop through the lens of animation. So we're not going to be talking a whole lot about, filters and blurs and things like that, but we're just going to focus on how we can draw inside of Photoshop. All of your artwork is going to be done inside of Photoshop. So you're going to be drawing stuff in Photoshop. Now, I just want to make sure the expectation is set before we go any further. You do not have to be a world-class artist to do well in this class. This is a movement class. So we've got to focus entirely on the animations and the motions that we're creating, okay? So you can do all of this stuff with stick figures and spheres, okay? That's fine. It really, really is. Our first assignment, as we mentioned last week, is going to be the classic bouncing ball, as it gives us a fantastic opportunity to explore the basic principle of squash and stretch. More on that in a minute. Okay, more on that in a minute. Before we get started with the principles of animation and talk about the animation process, let's just kind of take a small little tour of Photoshop so that everyone in here is basically up and running with the application. Now, for those of you that are sitting in front of machines, I definitely would encourage you to follow along. You can find Photoshop down on your dock. It's the one that says PS. It's the square that says PS. I'm working on CS6 here. I'm not on CC yet, which is why my icon looks just ever so slightly different from yours. But that's Photoshop chilling down there on our desktop. Now, when you open up Photoshop, it's going to look something very similar to this. Okay. Now, just ignore this screen in the background. That's my web browser poking through. But you're probably going to see something that's like this or like this. I go to Window, Application Frame, something that looks like this. Both of these are fine. They're completely legitimate environments. I've just changed my Photoshop to include what's called the application frame, and now the entire app kind of moves around in a single window. I often don't like that. Okay, I'm kind of a legacy Photoshop user. We didn't have that application frame for a number of years, so I tend to not use it. However, for you guys, it's important to know that you can turn it on and off. Because what we gain by not having that application window is the ability to very quickly have floating palettes inside of our application. I like that. That's just how my brain works, having floating windows that I can very quickly go in and out of without too much fuss and fuss. If you like the application frame, do it. If it makes it easier for you, I say do it. If it's easier for your brain to figure out, do it. There is no wrong way of working inside of Photoshop. It's also important to know that you can where to change it. Window, application frame, right down there. Okay. We have the blessing and the curse of learning and working in an open computer lab. Okay. In the mornings, this room is dominated by the photography students, and they use Photoshop very, very different than how we use Photoshop. They change settings all the time. They don't close things. They don't restore the defaults. It turns into a little bit of an administrative nightmare working between the disciplines. So keep that in mind. Your Photoshop is going to change based on the person that was using it earlier in the day. Also, when you work over in the design lab, going to be an issue. Yeah, Leland, go ahead.
You can reset the settings, I think it's on the back.
Let's,
Shift, Alt, Command.
something like that. Yeah, Shift Alt. Yeah, there is a keyboard shortcut. You can, what is it, Command Shift Alt or something like that, and then you click on the icon in your dock, and it resets Photoshop to its factory settings. I've already launched Photoshop, so I'm not going to do that. That's a command that you have to do upon clicking on the icon. That's a great way to very quickly restore everything back to its factory defaults. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that on mine, but you're more than welcome to do so in the design lab or on your local desktop. Now, when we're working in Photoshop, we have to create something that's called a Photoshop document. What is this Photoshop document? Yeah, it's a layered picture file, right? If you notice on my screen right now, you don't see anything. There's nothing for me to draw on. There's nothing for me to manipulate. It's an empty environment. We have to create something in order for Photoshop to give us the ability to paint and draw. So I'm going to go to the top of the screen where it says File, and I'm going to choose New. Keyboard shortcut Command-N, and you're going to get access to this little, whoops. Let's try this again here, computer. Hello, computer. There we go. All right, this is what it looks like. We'll get up close and personal with it. All right. Now, this window is really important because this is going to define the grid of pixels that Photoshop is going to create for us. This isn't like other image editing applications where you have this never-ending canvas where you can paint as far as you want. Photoshop, at its core, is an image editing application that works with rasterized bitmap images. More on that in a minute. But ultimately, what a rasterized bitmap image is a whole series of pixels that are glued to each other, right? In a grid. How many colors can a pixel be? One color, okay? we get to define how big that grid of pixels ultimately is going to turn out to be in the width and height settings. So it's 1280 by 720. These are the two parameters that I would like you guys to focus on going forward. 1280 by 720. 1280 by 720. Write that down. Put it in your notes. That's the height and width that we're going to be doing everything in this class with. Okay? 1280 by 720. Does anyone know why 1280 by 720? It's kind of the size of an animation frame, kinda. I'm just going to hit OK just for a moment and get a. Okay, that works. Okay, so we got 1280 by 720. Okay, 720 pixels. That's an important series of numbers for us. We're going to be doing everything inside of this course for broadcast, right? It's my goal as an instructor to produce, a dozen or so different portfolio pieces. Hopefully these portfolio pieces that you create should be inserted into some sort of demo DVD that highlights your talents, okay? I want all of our imagery to integrate cleanly into that demo DVD, okay, or onto the web. There's a whole series of industry standard frame sizes that we have to adopt. 1280 by 720 is one of those. I come from the traditional feature film and broadcast environment, so I'm used to working with these numbers. But if you are coming from another background, in the broadcast world, this is often referred as 720p. So if you're buying a television set or at Best Buy and you see 720p, this is the number that they're physically talking about, 1280 by 720. Now, these are not the only numbers that we have access to inside of the broadcast world. Does anyone know the other two? 19. There's actually one before that, but there is. So you got 720p. There's one called 1080i. Okay, which is 1440 by 1080. And then the one that you see often, especially on a lot of cameras these days, is 1080p. A lot of televisions. I'm very fortunate at home to have a television that's a native 1080p television. Looks great. And you can see that the pixel resolution goes up even more, which is fantastic. Okay. I love that we're in the HD world because we're getting closer and closer and closer to the resolutions and the size of imagery that the print folks have been doing for years, right? If you were to print out a poster, it's not going to be too much larger than these numbers here. It is larger, but not drastically larger, okay? For many, many years, basically starting in the late 40s all the way up until about 2000, we were working with standard definition. So the lowest quality television signal out there is called standard definition. Does anyone know the frame size, the pixel frame size of a standard definition television signal? Kinda. It is. It is. If we were to measure it all in square pixels, it's 640 by 480. But in its native non-square, it's 720 by 480. 720 by 480. That is absolutely teeny tiny, right? That's a postage stamp, okay? We've been looking at very, very few pixels for a number of years. Earlier, when we watched that little video from Walt Disney, it was at 720 by 480. And if you notice, the native 100% size of that video was very tiny within my computer monitor, right? It's tiny. Yeah, you can get away with murder at that resolution because there's really not a whole lot of pixels to define the overall shape of the image. Your camera doesn't even need to be in focus, because the audience is never going to tell. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm very happy that we're now in the HD world, okay? In addition, if we were to publish any of this content like YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo, 720p, 1280 by 720 is the bottom of the ladder when it comes to image quality. So it's the perfect frame size for us to author all of our content within, okay? It's going to look good on your television sets, it's going to look good on YouTube, and it's going to look good on your DVDs when you make them, when you get to that point, okay? Take every opportunity in this class to make portfolio pieces, okay? At the end of your academic career here, you will make a portfolio, okay? As you advance on to either a four-year school, an art school, or out there in industry, all three of those require a portfolio. What you don't want to have happen at the end of your tenure is to have, 2 or 3 good portfolio pieces. You guys want to have an entire library of things that are portfolio pieces, and then we can cherry pick the best one of that bunch, okay? Everything should be made for your portfolio. All right, let me zoom out here. We can go ahead and get started. So I've made my 1280 by 720 Photoshop document, and this is what it looks like, okay? This is what it looks like. Yes, sir?
Should there be any particular resolution?
Can you say that again?
I'm sorry, should there be any particular resolution? Because my yours was 72 and mine was 300.
You know, if it's at 72, that's fine. If it's at 300, that's fine too. I wouldn't go, 72 is perfect for what we're doing in this class. If you go up to 300, pixels per inch or dots per inch, then you're just kind of wasting space for us in the motion world. The pixels per inch and the dots per inch, that's a number that's really only important for the print guys, not something that's important for us in the animation world. So I would just put it at 72 and forget about it. In addition, we're also on that same create new document window that we were looking at before. The other thing that we want to make sure that we have toggled is square pixels. That way, the images that we create in Photoshop are going to look perfect on our computer screens and Facebook and YouTube. Because I know you're going to want to go home and share these with your family and friends, because they're awesome. You guys are going to do some good work in here. So square pixels down there at the bottom. We also have an option here to control and to ask Photoshop to create a series of backgrounds. We can either have our background be white, we can be the background color, which is something we'll talk about later, or transparent. I almost always leave it at white, but if you're getting a little checkered board pattern in the background of your document, that's where to change it. Okay, I'd change it to white. All right. Okay. So some of you guys are going to have a screen that looks not too dissimilar from mine. Others, I'm looking around the room here, and it looks very, very different. Let me show you the big difference. Right now, my Photoshop has my Photoshop document just kind of floating in its window, and I actually kind of like it like this. This is how I prefer working, but it might not work for you. Okay. If you hit the F key on your keyboard, you're going to go into what's called full screen mode. Okay, and now that one Photoshop document has been filled inside the entire application, and you can see we have these gray borders that are chilling around the outside of our document. Okay, it's a little bit more difficult to travel around your document. What if I wanted to paint like way over here on this side of my frame? Okay, does anyone know how I can move the right side of my frame more towards the center? Spacebar. If you press and hold the spacebar, it's going to serve as a toggle for whatever tool that you're using to the hand tool. And now, let me just zoom in on my cursor so you can see what's going on. So I got my brush tool active, and I can go ahead and paint. But while the brush tool is still on, I can press and hold the spacebar, and my cursor changes to a little hand. And now I'm free to move my canvas anywhere I want within inside of my application, and life is good. Zoom in and out, great question. If you want to zoom in and out, you can find over here on your toolbar, there's a little magnifying glass. Yeah, this guy right here, a little magnifying glass. You can left click, zoom in. If you hold down the control key the option key while that tool is still on, you can zoom out. New inside of CS6 and CC, if you left click and drag, get an interactive zoom, which is kind of neat. It's a great way to very quickly go, woo, I'm going to look over there, and then zoom out. Kind of fun. All right, I'm going to go back to my brush tool just momentarily. Before we go too much further, let's just keep talking about that F key. Because what's going to happen if you hit the F key again? Does it go back? Yeah, there's actually 3 viewing options here in Photoshop. We have the floating window, we have full screen, and then when I have, and this is purely something that I've come up with, this is like the distraction-free mode, where we don't get the toolbars, we don't get the layers palette, we just get our artwork. And if I had my rulers off, it would just be a black background and a white canvas. I think technically this is called like presentation mode or something like this, a great way to highlight your work without seeing the rest of the application interface on your screen. So the F key, you're going to see me toggling through these a lot. The F key. It's just a roundabout way of going through it. All right, questions on that? So find a mode that works for you. Find a mode that works for you. There is no wrong way of doing it. There's just your way of doing it. All right. I'm going to hit the F key and zoom back in here, and we can start talking about the rest of the application. Now, there's some other areas within inside of our interface that we need to talk about. Now that we're comfortable working within kind of navigating our document, let's talk about the rest of the interface, because you're going to learn a lot about Photoshop over the next couple of weeks. Where can we find all of our tools inside of Photoshop? On the left-hand side. Yeah, a number of you have already navigated to that part of your screen. This is it. These are all your tools way over here. Let me turn on my fun little highlighter app here so I can draw focus to things. All right. Yeah, so all of our tools are over here. Oop, come on, Photoshop. Let's try that again, shall we? Oh, no, I guess it's not going to let me do it today. All right, well, these are all of our tools over here, okay? These are all of our tools, and there's a bunch of them. We're not going to go through all of the tools today, but just know that this is where your toolbar is, and it's always going to be docked over here on the left-hand side. Whenever you have a tool active, like, for example, I have my brush tool turned on, the top of the screen is going to give you a whole series of tool options. So we kind of have to keep our eyeball on this part of our interface, as it allows us to change how that particular tool is going to be functioning inside the interface. With the brush tool, I can change the blending mode, the opacity. I can turn it into an airbrush. I get a lot of options that are going to modulate how this tool can work. All right, let's keep cruising. Now, the most important part of the interface is this right-hand side, because this is kind of where we're going to be doing the lion's share of our editing operations. Now, for me, my area kind of looks like this. Yours might look ever so slightly different on CC. Yours might look like have some color swatches, something like that. You may see adjustments. Let me show you some really great power user keyboard shortcuts and some tricks to minimize these areas of the interface that are not necessarily important for everyday tasks, but that we still need available to us to do some pretty important stuff. Okay, check this out. This is actually kind of neat. A lot of folks don't know this about the about the Photoshop interface, but I really don't need my color tab or my swatches tab open all the time. I would like to have that part of my interface back and give more real estate to my layers palette, which is the most important element, right? Is there a way that I can collapse that tab? What is it? Magic. The little which arrows? Not so much. These guys? Not exactly what I was going for. Not exactly what I was going for. Yeah, this is just going to make it into kind of little fly-out menus, which I'm not a big fan of, but that, to each their own. Say again? That one? Yeah, not exactly what I'm going for, but check it out. Because I still want to have access to my all this other stuff down at the bottom, right? This is the area that I want to focus all of my attention on. Check this out. If you were to double-click on the tabs, it's going to collapse that tab vertically within inside the interface and give you more real estate for the other open tabs inside of the application frame. I like that. That's a good one, because I like having access to my adjustment layers and my styles palette, but I don't necessarily need to have them open and on all the time. So being able to expand and contract them kind of like an accordion is really cool. Double-clicking on the tab will collapse it. Because ultimately what we want to give access to is our layers palette. This layers tab is where it all happens. This is where the magic happens inside of Photoshop. Photoshop is a layered-based image editing application. What in the world does that mean?
I've dealt with Corel. It's basically, instead of just one picture, you can basically have something overlap another.
Yeah, so it allows us to overlap things easily inside of our document. What's another way that we can describe a layered-based image editing application?
Digital cellophane layers.
Yeah, we saw it earlier with the multiplane camera video, right? I intentionally showed that video for a number of different reasons. And you guys remember that part in the video where they started to expand the flattened image of the moon, the barn, and the road, and they started to expand it into a whole series of different panes of glass. That is, in every sense, a precursor to the Adobe Photoshop layer system. Okay? We are painting, in essence, on layers of glass. Okay? And each layer is transparent. It only turns opaque or not see-through, okay, when we paint pixels onto it. Okay? So we're painting on layers of glass. I have one layer. Okay, you can see that when I created my Photoshop document, it automatically created a layer called background, and I've been painting on that background layer as we've gone through today's first little bit. But how do I create a new layer? Maybe I want to have a layer that's got a circle on it that's separate from my background layer.
Click on the little tab next to the trash can.
You got it. This part of the interface at the bottom of our Layers tab is really, really critical. Super important, as it gives us access to all the tools and the buttons that allow us to create and delete layers quickly inside of Photoshop. Yes, sir?
Or if you're using one of the vector tools on the left, the type tool or the pen tool or the shade tool, or the rectangle, octagon, ellipse tool.
Yeah. You don't necessarily have to go over there. That's correct. There's other ways to create layers instead of Photoshop, but I certainly think the most prevalent way of creating layers is by clicking on this little document icon right next to the trash can. I'll zoom in so the folks in the back can see what I'm working on. Oops, zooming in on my mouse cursor. Let me just put my mouse cursor down over here. All right. Whoops. Okay. So now that we can see it's a little bit bigger, this is the icon that we want to press. The page with the corner turned up. That's going to allow us to make new layers. Empty layers, transparent layers that aren't going to contain any sort of opaque pixel on it. How would we delete a layer? Trash can it, man. Absolutely. We just drag that layer into the trash can, rock and roll, and now we're ready to go. It's a great way to quickly delete your stuff inside of After Effects. We'll talk about a number of these other buttons as we go through the next couple of weeks. But for today, we're going to focus primarily just on these two icons in the bottom of our Layers tab. So if you see me creating a new layer, I clicked on that page icon at the bottom of my Layers tab. All right, let's do it. Let's make a new layer. Boom, clicked on it. There it is. Now we have two layers inside of my Adobe. Oh, excuse me. I almost said After Effects. The last class I taught last night, I said After Effects about a bazillion times because I teach After Effects. It is going to happen. I'm just going to tell you. It's going to happen. Huh?
Well, I already use it for that animate thing I showed you. I mean,
It's great. It's a great tool. Great tool. Okay, so now we have two layers chilling in our layers palette here inside of Photoshop. Let's do something with these layers, okay? Now, I've been painting with the brush tool, and let me show you some of the parameters of painting with the brush tool. It's a whole lot of fun, okay? So to find the brush tool, the paintbrush tool, it's over here in our toolbar, and it's right below, whoops, excuse me, it's right below the Band-Aid, this guy. That's our brush tool. That's our brush tool. And this is, in every sense, just a paintbrush. That's all it is. It's just going to be a circular paintbrush. If we click on it, we're going to get a whole series of paintbrush options at the top of our screen. So if I just cruise up there, here's all of our paintbrush options. The one that I want to focus on is this first guy, this one right here. This one is important because, as you can see, what does this option allow us to do? Size and hardness. You got it. And most importantly, the size is what we want to focus all of our attention on. Okay? Right now, the size of my brush is 5 pixels. If I wanted to make it bigger, just click on that thing, and you can see that my cursor icon also gets bigger. Look at my cursor. It's a gigantic circle right now. And if I keep increasing the size, we get a nice little bit of feedback from the application that indicates the size of that paintbrush on our screen. Okay, let's just take a step back for a second. See what it does. Whee! Awesome. Much bigger paintbrush. Okay. What determines the paintbrush's color? Oh, actually, let me take a step back. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention about changing the size of your brush, because you're going to be doing this a lot inside of Photoshop. You can change your brush a number of different ways. Give me another one. What? The bracket keys, absolutely. And what Raphael is talking about are the keys on your keyboard that look like this. I think technically they're called the braces keys. Yeah, it's right next to the P key. Okay, the braces keys. Those will allow you to interactively change your brush larger or smaller. Okay, so if you want a big fluffy brush like I have, or a small, teeny tiny brush, that's a great way of very quickly changing the size of your brush. It's not the only way to change the size of your brush. Give me some other ones. Left click. Yeah, the right click. It's the right click. Yeah, left click is going to, I was like, are you sure about the Katie? Left click is just going to draw. The right click will give you this cool little contextual pop-up. And this is neat because now we can keep the cursor where we're working. We don't have to travel away from our document. We can very quickly go in and change the size and the hardness of our brush. What's the hardness value going to do to our brush? Yeah, how fuzzy the edges are, okay? As you can see right now, at a hardness value of 0, this is the type of brush stroke that I'm going to produce, right? Just very, very crisp, hard edges. However, if I change the hardness value down, now I got soft, blurry edges, okay? Great way to soften the effect just with our brushes, okay? Hardness value, something that we're going to be doing quite a lot. Okay. Also, and I got to remember, yes, if you hold down the Option and Control key, you can interactively change the brush as well. So you don't necessarily, that's 3 different ways of changing your brush size. Option Control, right mouse, or by hitting the braces key, okay? You'll see me doing all 3 of them at some point during this semester, okay? Option Control is relatively new. I think that may have popped in either CS6 or CS5, so it's not something that's found in earlier versions of the application. All right. Okay. So what controls the color of our brush? Foreground what? Yeah, the foreground color picker. Steve, where can I find all that? Yeah, down here in our toolbar. Let me zoom in on it. Lower left-hand part of the interface, right there. That element, let me just put my cursor on it so you guys can see it. This bad boy, I want to make my brush smaller. This bad boy allows us to change the foreground color. When we paint, we're always going to be painting with the foreground color. You can see on my screen that my foreground color is this kind of maroony dark red. Maybe I wanted to paint with blue, so what would I need to do? Yeah, just click on it. It's super easy, right? It's fantastic. You can just click on it. Just click on it, and you're going to get the standard Adobe Color Picker. Let's talk about this just for a brief moment and figure out how to decode this interesting little work environment. It is different. It is very different, actually, from a lot of the other color pickers that you're used to seeing out there in the real world. So let's just chat about it for a second. All right. So how's this thing work? Click on what?
Well, if you want to choose whatever colors are in the back
Yep.
area, you just kind of move it. You can click on right onto it and drag it around too. So you don't have to do colors.
Crev, you're absolutely right. What part of this area represents the color that I would paint with? The bar. The bar? Sure about that?
The big square.
So where it says new and current, yeah, that's kind of a preview of the color that I'm going to paint with. But is there something else that tells me precisely what color I'm going to paint with? All those numbers? I'm not a number guy. Not a number guy. More visually, in this part right here. That little circle. That little circle is the physical part within this frame that represents the color that we get to paint with. So if I wanted to change the color that I'm going to paint with, I have to move that circle. Okay? This is a hue, saturation, brightness color picker. Okay? Hue, saturation, and brightness. Hue would be color. Saturation would be the amount of color, and brightness is just lightness or darkness. Okay. At the top of the screen, top left-hand corner, that's the brightest area within the color picker. At the bottom of the of our work area in here, we have the darkest areas of our color picker. Okay. So in every sense, what we're changing when we move that little dot around is the saturation and the brightness values of our color picker. How do I change the hue? How do I change the color? I want to paint with like blue or something. Yeah, that rainbow bar is what I have to manipulate. You got it. So I want to dock my color picker in the upper right-hand corner, and then now I can grab this part, this little guy, navigate it up and down, and change the hue. Voila. I get to choose which color I want to work with very, very quickly. This is the standard Adobe color picker. You're going to see this in all the Adobe applications. Get comfortable working with it. Get comfortable working with it. All right, so there's my blue. Let's hit OK. Whoops. Let's hit OK. And you can see down here in my foreground color picker, that little red cube has been transformed into a blue cube, and I'm free to go and paint with blue. Let's make a new layer here. And now I can paint with blue. Whee! Lots of fun. Lots of fun. Now the great thing about working with layers is that the blue paint strokes are separated from the red paint strokes, right? We're painting on layers of glass. The areas of the blue layer that I didn't paint on are transparent, which is why we can see through them into the red layer below. Over here in our layers palette, we get a really nice indication as to how all of these layers are functioning inside of our work area. You can see we have layer 1, which has a white background and some red paint strokes on top of it. And then on layer 2, it's just the blue paint strokes. How can I turn off the visibility of layer 2?
The eyeballs?
Yeah, the visibility eyeballs. This little icon immediately to the left of the image thumbnail. This bad boy. And let me zoom out so we can see the effect. We're going to just click on it till our heart's content. Pretty cool, huh? I like that. Before we go too much further away from color, let's talk about the color swatch right behind the blue one, because we actually have two different color swatches, or two different color pickers that we get to work with. Whoops, excuse me. There we go. So we have the foreground color picker, which is the top one, and then what's that white cube behind it? Background. So there's two different colors that we get to load into our interface and paint with at any given time. We can paint with these whenever we want. So I can go back into I can just click on that white cube. This time I'm going to change my color to green. Left click in the work area, drag it up over there. Then I'll drag this slider into the green that I want. And now on that empty layer, I can paint with green. Oh wait, hold on a second. I'm painting with blue. I thought I was going to paint with green. What's going on? X. We got to swap it. The foreground and the background color picker are ways for us to very quickly preserve a color in kind of a little preset. But the tools, the paintbrush tools and the shape tools are almost always going to use the foreground color as the color to place down inside of our document. So we got to flip them. We got to flip them, okay? We have to send the background color into the foreground and change their role. That's what this little arrow allows us to do. And you can see when I click on it, it swaps the color. As Katie pointed out, the X key, X is an X-ray, will allow you to do this on your keyboard. X is going to flip the foreground color and the background color. X key. Same as doing that little arrow.
So it's just like, is that one of those things where you put just two colors that you're using a lot and then you stick it right there and you can switch?
You got it. If you're painting with red and if you're painting with blue and green and you've just dialed in those colors, put them both in the foreground and the background color pickers there, and then you don't have to go, you just hit the X key whenever you want to change colors. It's pretty great. Okay. All right. Now let me hit the X key, and now I can paint with the green paintbrush. Pretty fantastic. Pretty fantastic. Now I have some gobbledygook here. It's not exactly the most compelling piece of artwork on the face of the planet. In many ways, it looks exactly what my one-year-old son did last night as we were playing with my iPad, as one might expect for a one-year-old. So I definitely want to get rid of some of this stuff. How do I delete layers inside of Photoshop? Control Z, okay, that's a great way of doing it. You can undo things, which is fine, get rid of the paint strokes, but I want to delete an entire layer. So you can always just take the layer and drag it into the trash can. Oops, I double-clicked, I apologize. Just drag it into the trash can. Down at the bottom of your layers palette, that will work. Oops. Now, it's Robert, right? Rob brought up Control Z or Command Z for us here on the Mac. That's the historical undo key, right? After Photoshop has a very interesting undo cue. Okay, how can you go? Or what does the undo key do here? If you're to Command Z, what does it do? Yeah, you're not going to go back in time over and over and over again. It's only going to go back one step, and then it turns into a toggle, right? That way, it gives us a really nice way to kind of preview if what we're doing is working or if it's not working. We just go back and forth, back and forth. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I want to hit Command Z over and over again. Boop, 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 boop. And you can see that I'm not going back in time. I'm just going back in time one step. If I really did want to go back in time, how could I do it? Yeah. Step backwards. Step backwards. So it's that's the Control key. I think it's the Control key. Yeah. It's Alt. Yeah, it's Alt. Excuse me. It's Alt. Yeah. So you can step backwards and you can step forward. So that's how you do it. If you really wanted a true undo, those are the two ways you can do it. Yeah, it'll only go back as so much, so don't rely on it, okay? I think there is a number that you get to change in your preferences. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. But it is something that I think you can change in your Photoshop preferences. Okay, so I'm going to delete some of these layers. Oops. There we go, get rid of some of this mumbo jumbo. And I'm going to get back to the very, very beginning. Now, you're going to get down to one layer. Now, Photoshop requires at least one layer active in our scene. One layer. You got to have it. So I can't delete my background because it's the last layer in my Photoshop layers palette, right? So if I wanted to delete that layer, I got to add a new one, maybe a new empty one, and then delete that background layer. There we go. All right. Questions? Pretty simple, right? We're going to try to keep the tools inside of Photoshop as simple as we can. Now, earlier we were talking about how to work with the paintbrush, but it's not the only tool that we have access to. There's a number of really great image creation tools that will allow us to quickly draw some shapes. And as you look forward to doing your homework assignment here momentarily, shapes are going to play a much more important role. So let's talk about how we can make shapes in Photoshop quickly. All right, making shapes, really easy. I'm working on a transparent layer here, and if you look over in your toolbar, this little button, that little button is going to give us access to all of our shape tools. Now, if you look carefully at every single one of the tools in the toolbar, you're going to find a consistent little UI element among them. What is it? Yeah, that little white arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. What does that little white arrow mean? What's it represent? Yeah, there's more options. We could expand that area of the interface to expose new tools, right? In my mind, that means there's nested tools inside of there. So if I left-click and hold, I'll get a flyout menu that includes all the tools that are buried inside of that button. And I'm going to start working with the rectangle tool. All right. Now, when we're working with tools, it's really important to remember that there's actually 3 different ways that we can create shapes inside of Photoshop. And this is going to be a little bit of an issue for us in the next couple of weeks, because people often forget that you can change how Photoshop creates shapes, right? The toggle between these shapes is in the top left-hand corner of the interface. See where it says shape there? The little menu. If you click on that, you're going to get some options. Oops, I double-clicked on it. Sorry. I don't want to create a rectangle. There it is. So those are the 3 options. We can create a shape, we can create a vector path, or we can create pixels. Okay? Or we can create pixels. Okay? I would recommend, just for today, just for the easy part of this class, that we work with pixels. Okay? That way we can erase things, we can draw over them. It's not going to be a barrier for you guys to do your homework. Okay? We'll talk about the differences between all 3 of them maybe at a future day, but let's use pixels just for this first homework assignment and get us through this first assignment. All right? And then we'll start going into the nuance of creating vector shapes with the shape option here. So I'm going to create pixels. And let me zoom out here. Now, when I'm working with pixels, it's going to take the foreground color, and it's basically going to make a shape where I drag out. So I just left-click and dragged out a box, and I've made a rectangle. Woo! Awesome. That was fantastic. I'm going to create a new layer here again by clicking on the little document icon. And this time, I want to change my foreground color to a lovely shade of red and attempt to make a perfect square. How do I make a perfect square inside of Photoshop? Yeah, hold down the Shift key while you're left-clicking and drag, and it's going to constrain the proportions to create a perfect square. Aha! Wonderful. This same idea is systemic, so it goes all the way into the ellipse tool. So on a new layer here, I can maybe just go make a blue one. So with the ellipse tool, it gives us the option to make an oval. And if we were to certainly go back in and hold down the Shift key while we left-clicked and dragged, we'd be able to create a perfect circle. Something to maybe consider and think about as we walk through the construction of this week's homework assignment. All right, last but certainly not least, let's talk about the line tool, because I like working with the line tool, but it is a little bit kind of funky. Okay, as you'd imagine, the line tool is just going to make a whole series of lines. Nothing too phenomenal here. How would I change the size of the line? Maybe I want a thick jobber. You got it. You got it. Remember those tool options at the top. Let me zoom in. It's at the top in our tool options. There it is, weight right there. And if I want, let's just double it or quadruple it. Now we'll be able to create a really thick line. Okay? So that's how we change the size of all of our lines. Okay. Now I've created a whole bunch of pixel-based shapes, some of which I'm very happy, others I'm not. How do I delete things inside of Photoshop? I want to delete all of those lines that I just created a moment ago. Yeah, James, go ahead.
There's a couple ways you can do it. If you want to delete the lines, since you put them on the same layer as the circle, you would have to use the marquee tool and drag around the shape.
I love it.
Line, and then press delete.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Now we have, as James outlined, we have a little bit of an issue here. If you look at the way I've constructed my scene, I got my red cube on its own layer, I got my green rectangle on its own layer, but we have this blue layer which contains all the information for both the line and my oval. I only want to delete my lines. I want to keep my ovals. So there's a couple different ways. Photoshop, at its core, has a really powerful selection system. This is an important idea. If there's one thing Photoshop is built around, it's selections. And the idea is very simple when it comes to working with selections. Whatever is selected will be edited, right? So if I select maybe portions of my line, I can affect just portions of that line. If nothing is selected, everything is going to be edited. Let me show you where the selection tools in Photoshop are and then and how to use them. The selection tools can be found on icons number 2 and 3 inside of Photoshop. So this is the Move tool. More on that in a minute. And then we have the Marquee Selection tool, which will allow us to drag out a selection box. Let's just activate it. And I'm going to put this big, fat, thick line on the interior of my Marquee Selection box. So I'm going to left-click and then drag out a box. So whatever's on the interior of that box is going to be changed. I can move it around. I can give it a different color if I'd like. But I can also delete it very, very easily. Let's hit the backspace key on our keyboard and delete this bad boy. And now we're on our way. So if I wanted to, I can go to this portion of my screen. I still have the Marquee Selection box on. So I notice that excuse me. You can move your Marquee Selection box around just by left-clicking on the interior of it. Then hitting the backspace key will delete just what's on the inside of that box. This little section over here wasn't on the inside, so it wasn't changed. Nor was the bottom portion of that line on the inside of the box, so it wasn't deleted when I hit that backspace key. Whatever's on the inside of that box is selected. Whatever's selected will get edited. If nothing's selected, everything is going to get edited. How do I drop the selection? Maybe I don't want to work with this box anymore and I want to go select something else. Command V. D, yes, I was like, Command V. Yeah, Command D is the deselect command. You can also find it, let me go back. You can also find it under the Select pull-down menu, and it's right there. It's going to deselect the pixels on that particular layer. Really great. You're going to be doing selections a lot. So I have some cleanup work that I have to do on my little lines, because I need to go in, I need to delete some of these pixels, and I certainly want to delete all of these guys. Check it out. I still got my Marquee Selection tool active. I can select that one, but now I want to also select all of this stuff down here. Is there any way that I can add to the currently selected pixels? How do I add pixels to my selection? Shift. It's Shift, right? If you hold down the Shift key, you can add pixels to a currently active selection. So I'm just going to, you see the little plus sign showing up next to my cursor? So I can go and grab those guys. Then move my screen a little bit, hold down the Shift key again. Go grab these larger swaths of pixels down here. Now, let me zoom out. Now if you take a look at what we've done, we've selected discontiguous parts of our image with the selection box. Hitting the delete key now will give us the result that we're after. Bam. And now we're right smack dab back to what we want. How do I deselect the pixels that I currently have selected on my document? Command D. D as in Delta. D as in dog. D as in deselect. All right. Command D. Okay. Now that we're comfortable with the general idea of working with selections, let's talk about how we can move things around on our frame. The cool thing about working in this layered-based environment is that I get independent control over each one of my layers, and more specifically, the contents of those layers. I want to be able to move my red cube down to the bottom part of my image. I want it to move it down below my green cube. Since they're separated on their own independent discrete layers, I can very easily control that just by selecting the layer over here that I want to work with and then grabbing the Move tool, which is the first tool inside of our toolbar. And now if I left click and drag on it, you can see I can change that element's location anywhere I want within inside of my Photoshop document. Really, really powerful. Or just hold down Command. I don't know that one. Ah, I see what it's doing. Yeah, that works too. That works too. Great way to automatically select the layer that's right underneath the cursor of your mouse. Okay, so the Move tool allows us to change the location of any of our selected elements inside of our scene. Select the layer, you can move it around. What if I wanted to have the green layer, the big green rectangle, be in front of both the, be in front of the red cube? How would I do that?
You move the layer in front of the
Yeah, by reordering the layers in my layers palette, I can create a much different effect. I want to have my green layer cover up my red cube. So by left-clicking and dragging on my green layer, I can place it in between the blue and the red, and boom, I can change the order of visibility within inside of my Photoshop document. It's just that easy. Dragging and dropping our layers in the layers palette will change the apparent visibility of all of the layers that you currently are working with. Yeah, so let's do it again. Maybe I want to have the blue sphere be behind the red and the green cube. So I can grab my blue sphere layer in my layers palette, and I'm going to drag it down so that that line that shows up is below layer number 3. And the moment I let go, everything updates and changes. Really great system. Okay, questions so far? Everyone's good? Yes, sir.
You're kind of a little too fast, but however, delete stuff.
Delete stuff. How do we do? What are you trying to delete, Zach? A layer or just
layer.
portion? How do we help Matt? How do we delete a layer? Drag it into the trash can. Take that layer and drag it right there to that trash can icon, and it's going to go away. Yep. All right. Other questions? All right. I tell you what. Oops. Let's take a break. Take a break. The clock is ticking. Okay. So before the break, we're talking about just working in Photoshop and some of the basic ways of creating some shapes, doing some basic paintbrushing, working with layers. But this is a movement class, so it's important that we spend some time talking about the animation engine that we're going to be practicing within here in Photoshop. Now, I gotta put a little asterisk, and I'm in Photoshop. Come on, Dylan. Actually, I want to put a very big asterisk next to. Oh, that didn't work. Very big asterisk. I guess it's more like a star, right? Isn't it an asterisk? Maybe this is like an asterisk. That's a horrible asterisk. Now I'm just playing. I'm doodling. There's my asterisk next to everything done in Photoshop. Photoshop is not a video editing application. It is not an animation package. It really isn't. Photoshop is an image editing application. However, we're going to be bending it to kind of work with inside of our animation production pipeline. I'm going to be showing you guys some things that I do not necessarily endorse out there in the professional world, okay? There is a timeline. You can do video editing in Photoshop. I don't know why you'd want to do video editing in Photoshop, but you can do video editing in Photoshop. Like you can do 3D modeling in Photoshop. What? No, you don't do 3D modeling in Photoshop. You just don't, okay? Photoshop has turned into the ultimate digital Swiss Army knife. They're trying to make a net so large that it catches everyone, and I think in that process they have done something pretty horrible, okay? However, the traditional cell animation stuff is kind of old. That kind of goes back all the way into the 90s, and that stuff is pretty neat. However, getting to that traditional cell animation workflow requires us to go into an animation window that is like After Effects. And let me tell you, you are not, if I ever catch you doing motion graphics in Photoshop, I'm going to be very grumpy with you, okay? Because I'm all about choosing the right tool for the right job. Doing motion graphics in Photoshop is not allowed. Not in my classroom, at least, okay? Like something that you'd see, like credits, like the motion graphics are like the elements that you'd see before a news show, before a television show would open. Do not do that in Photoshop. You can do it in Photoshop, just don't do it in Photoshop. The results are going to be very, very poor. It's going to take you 80 times longer, and it's going to look like garbage. Okay? Yeah. Don't do it. Don't do it ever again. Okay. I'm joking. It's all good. It's all good. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to explore some of these animation workflows inside of Photoshop. Okay. I want to get rid of my lovely asterisks and star and all this stuff. And let me make a new document here, or a new layer within my document. And let's start working here. Now, I'm going to make the world's best animation. It's going to be great. I'm going to make a little sphere, and it's going to go, woo! It's going to travel in an arc. It's just going to be amazing. Academy Award winning. So we got to first start off with a piece of artwork. Whenever we're animating, we have to start off with an initial shape first, okay? So let me just make a sphere. I'm going to go into my shape tools, the ellipse tool, and I want to make this a red sphere. And I'm going to hold down, I'm going to select my layer, and I'm going to hold down my shift key while I drag out my sphere to make my perfect circle. And now I want to grab the move tool and just move it to where I want to go, way over there. Now we're going to be participating and practicing the traditional frame-by-frame cell animation technique that the guys down at Disney have been doing since day one in this. Okay. We need a background. All good animations need a background. You're not allowed to do this checkered jobber. So let's make another layer. And I want to fill this layer with white pixels. Has anyone kind of stumbled on how we could do that?
Shift F5.
Edit, then fill.
Yes, edit fill. Yeah. No, I think that's a great suggestion. Or you can just make the rectangular tool and just draw out a big rectangle that goes in the background. I love it. Do it, man. Absolutely. I'm never going to say no to doing something creative in here. I'm going to do the most uncreative thing and just make it a white background. Okay? So to fill a layer with a color, you go Edit Fill. And you're going to get this pop-over box. And with inside this little menu, you get some options. You can fill that empty layer with the foreground color, or you can fill it with the background color, or get some other choices down here. I'm just going to choose white, and then hit OK. Then boom, there it is, nothing but white. Where's my sphere? Yeah, it's underneath my white layer, right? So what do I need to do to get my sphere back on my screen? Yeah, Jose's got it. We're just going to change the layer order in my layers palette to get my sphere back. Boom, there's my sphere back. Okay. Now that we have a background and we have a foreground, we're ready to start creating all the subsequent frames that are required for us to make the animation. When we're going through this process, we have to start thinking in poses. Your book does a great job of illustrating the importance of poses. From the reading, from what you've seen in the books, what is a pose? Yeah, hit me.
Pose is a single frame of animation. Whatever's in the animation, that's the single frame of it is a pose.
Single frame? I love it. What about this single frame is important? What does it define or establish?
Where your object is.
Okay, where it is, absolutely. And I think that maybe another way of thinking of this, it's going to define the extremity of a movement, right? Okay, it's an extreme. It's the total extents in which this object is going to travel within. I've already created my first frame of animation here. This is an extreme pose. This is where I want my animation to begin, right? Where do I want my animation to end? That'd be another extreme pose. We got to define the bounding box, if you will, that this animation is going to take place within. Where do I want my animation to end? The other side. Yeah, let's just make it the other side. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I want to still use that exact same shape, right? I don't want to draw another one. What would happen if I made an empty layer and then redrew my sphere?
You might draw it too big.
I might draw it too big. I might draw it too small. I might forget to accidentally hold down the shift key and make an oval instead of a sphere. This is the shape that I want my little character to retain throughout the duration of its animation. So how do I duplicate a layer? Command J. Great keyboard shortcut. Or what's the non-keyboard way of doing it? Right click? Is it actually in the right click menu? Duplicate layer. Oop, not delete layer. Oops. Butterfingers. Duplicate layer. Can you even give it a name? Okay. That works. I'm a drag and dropper. I really am. I'm old school. I like being able to physically go in and digitally manipulate my data. Okay. So here's my way of doing it. And this is something that you'll see me doing quite often. I'm just going to take that layer and I'm going to drag it not into the trash can, but onto the Create New Layer button downstairs. And it's going to make a duplicate of that layer. Okay? Now I have two of them. I have layer 4 and then layer 4 copy. What do I need to do to layer 4 copy?
Move it.
Move it. How do I do that?
You just select layer and then you select the sphere and then just move it upwards.
But what tool do I need to activate to move a sphere?
The black arrow, which is the path selection tool, A.
We're not working with paths here.
You already have the top one above the rectangular selection.
Yeah, which is the move tool. Okay, if I want to move something, I go grab the move tool. Don't over-engineer it, okay? If I want to move something, I grab the move tool. So I already got mine selected. It's active and turned on. So now I can move that layer where I want it to go, and I think that's where I want it to end. So now I've established in 2 frames here, or 2 layers, the extremity of this movement that I'm trying to craft inside of the application. I want my ball to start from the left and go all the way to the right. Now this is a pretty boring animation, is it not? Yeah, this is kind of stupid. So let's change it a little bit. Let's make it ever so slightly less stupid. Maybe I want it to go up to the top of the screen and then down to the bottom right. So what do I need to do? Make another copy. Absolutely. This time I'm going to utilize the Command J keyboard shortcut to duplicate that layer and then move it to define that extreme pose. Okay? Aha, wonderful, wonderful. This is great. Now we're starting to get an idea as to the path that this object is going to take place, or that this object is going to adopt during the animation. Okay. We need to be good stewards of our scene. Okay? Trust me when I say this. You need to be good stewards of your scene. Okay? I have 4 layers now. One's called layer 5, layer 4, layer 4 copy, and then layer 4 copy 2. This is going to turn into an organizational nightmare for us inside of Photoshop. So we need, if you keep copying things, Photoshop is not going to help you. It's just going to be like layer 4 copy 3, layer 4 copy 88. You know, it's just going to continue to grow out of control. So what would you recommend?
Name your layer.
Name your layers. How do you change the name of one of your layers? Yeah. Let me zoom over. I'm going to start on the background layer. Let me just zoom in over here. You can double click on it, okay? And I'm double clicking not on the image thumbnail, I'm double clicking on the text right here, okay? And this is going to be the one persistent element within inside of my scene. This is going to be my background. There it is. Now, unfortunately, in CS6, Photoshop has changed the way it's displaying all of its layers. I actually hate this. They used to give you an icon that gave you a really great preview of the entire layer. So it was really, really easy to see what those layers, or which layers represent which frames of animation. Let's see, is there a way to change that? Because I really, really hate it. Thumbnail contents entire. Aha! There it is. Aha! I figured it out. Great. So if you want to get your layers looking like mine, which I would recommend that you do, go to this icon, the downward arrow on the top right-hand corner of your layers palette, panel options. It's default in CC. Perfect. Perfect. Mine was on layer bounds in CS6. Go to entire document. That way you can just visually see which frame is which inside of your layers palette. That's going to help. Now we can get a good understanding as to how we want to name all this. Of course, layer 4 is going to turn into frame 1. This is frame, let's put it in the right order. So it goes frame 1. Now you can do this however you want. If you want frame 1 at the top, I think that's cool. Frame 2. And then this is, oops, excuse me, frame 3. All right. You're going to want to get into the habit of naming things inside of Photoshop. If you don't, it's in your hands. Okay, the success of these projects is now in your hands. Only you can prevent forest fires. Okay, only you can prevent yourself from getting confused. Okay, I can help you as much as I can, but at the end of the day, you're the one that's driving this ship. Okay. So it's your responsibility to manage your own media. What we've done here in the traditional sense is create the extreme poses. The book talks a lot about these extreme poses, and you've probably even heard reference to them either in the reading or in other capacities, that these extreme poses can also be classified as key frames, right? Key frames. They highlight the extremity of the movement that we're trying to establish, okay? Now, are these the only frames of animation that we're going to need to create? No, right? Because if we were to animate this right now, we'd only have 3 frames. It would look very clicky. I need to define a motion path that this ball is going to need to travel inside of my frame. So we need some extra frames in here. We need a lot of extra frames, actually. Let's kind of illustrate the animation cycle as is, okay? Just so you guys start to understand the importance of what's called the in-between frames. With only the extreme frames visible within the scene, it's not going to have that quality of movement that we're after. It's not going to feel smooth. It's going to feel very fast, very abrupt, and very jittery. Let's start animating this so we have a nice visual as to what this looks like. And then we can go back in later and add in all of our in-betweens. Okay, so to animate my sphere going from right here to right here to right here, we're going to go to the top of the screen where it says Window. And there's a panel at this long, long list called Timeline. timeline. Okay, you click on that. Panels, yep. Or excuse me, window, timeline. I apologize if I said panels. It's window, timeline. And that's going to bring open your timeline panel down here at the bottom. Okay. Now the default is going to give you something that looks like this. This is not the environment that we want to work in. This is the video editing environment. Boo. Boo. Okay. However, for whatever reason, in their infinite wisdom, so we used to have an animation palette inside of Photoshop, and it was great. It's wonderful. It worked perfectly. Now it's the timeline, and they've changed it to add in all these silly video editing features. So what we need to do now is create a video timeline. Okay, create a video timeline. Okay, and it looks something like this. Okay, ignore this in every sense. Ignore this, ignore this, ignore this. This is bad. This is horrible. This is silly. You are not allowed to work in this environment. However, down at the bottom, we have this magical button. Little button with 3 little cubes. And you can see when we get the tooltip highlight, it says convert to animation. That's what we want to do. Click on that button. It's going to change your interface ever so slightly. Okay? And we're going to get this really neat animation environment. Okay. Down here at the bottom in our timeline, this is where we're physically going to create frames of animation. What we've created up until now are just layers that represent what we want to see on that frame of animation. But we've only actually created one frame. Now notice when Photoshop created that one frame of animation, it automatically included every layer that was visible in our layers palette. Okay, what sphere do we want to see on our first frame of animation? Yeah, this one. Okay, so what I need to do in this frame is turn off the visibility of the other two, and you can see that the thumbnail updates. Okay, so on frame 1 of our animation, we're seeing layer 1 in our layers palette. Let's make another frame of animation. Luckily for us, the guys down at Photoshop have given us a consistent UI element. We have another little, flipped page icon in the panel down here. If we click on that, we'll create another frame of animation. Let's do it real fast. Oh, and now we have 2 frames of animation. 1 and 2. Now, what do we want to see on frame 2? Layer 2 in our from our layers palette. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of frame 1, or layer 1, excuse me, and turn on the visibility of the second one. Let's do it again. Let's make another 3rd frame of animation. And as you would imagine, we don't want to see the middle frame. We want to see the 3rd one. Congratulations, you've just made your first animation. Woo! It's stellar. Yeah. Disney, here I come! Right? No. We still have quite a journey in front of us. But I know all of you guys at one point will end up there. It's going to be great. Okay? So let's kind of figure out, let's ask Photoshop to play our animation. At the bottom of this panel, we get these cool little simple play controls. Okay? So if you hit the play button, it's going to cycle through your animation. Let's just... Yeah, let's talk about that. Okay? So right now, my animation is actually playing. Oop, and then it cycles to the next frame, and then a couple of seconds later, it goes. This is not exactly the compelling result that we're after, right? We want to work inside of a consistent frame rate. If you look very carefully at the bottom of each frame of animation, it tells you the duration of that frame. Do we want it at 5 seconds? No, we don't want all of our animation frames to be at 5 seconds. We want it to cycle on to the next one at the conclusion of that first one. And it's really obvious, but sometimes it's so obvious and it's impossible to see. There's this little drop-down arrow here. If we click on it, you get a whole series of different time indicators that will allow you to change the duration of that frame of animation. Some people like no delay, some people like 0.1. I think either of those is going to work just beautifully for what we're trying to accomplish. We'll get more specific with our delay as we go forward. Let's just put no delay, or 0.1, excuse me. Now I got to do it for 2 and 3. Do you think I can do them simultaneously? It'd be nice if I could do them simultaneously, right? Because if you kind of project yourself to the final project, you may have 300 of these things that you need to change, right? I'm not going to do each one individually. That'd be madness. So how do I do it? Yeah, Leland's got it. We're going to hold down the Shift key and then click on number 3, and it's going to automatically select number 3. So now 2 and 3 are selected, and any change that we make to one will be adopted by the other. Okay? All right. Now that each one is 0.1 seconds in duration, oh, I forgot to mention this. I apologize. We can also, right below our frames of animation, this little option here will allow us to loop our animation. Right now, it's only going to play the 3 frames and then stop. If we wanted to continuously play this over and over and over again, we can change the looping mechanism for our animation in this pull-down menu. Let's just do forever. So now it's just not going to stop. This is going to be great. Let's hit the play button now. Woo! Yeah, that's awesome, right? Yeah, right. It's brainwashing. I like it. Yeah, that's a really lame animation, but it works, right? This is the fundamental mechanics of animation. It really is, okay? In its most simplest form. This is the digital version of what the guys down at Disney were doing, almost 100 years ago, okay? Drawing circles. Everyone starts with circles, man. I remember when I was in y'all's shoes, I had an art class where we would literally spend the first 15 or 20 minutes every day in the art class just drawing circles. It was our warm-up exercise. We just drew circles. We got very, very good at drawing circles by the end of the course, Circles are an important element. Okay. This is not good. This is not good by any account, right? Yes, sir.
No, sorry, later.
You can ask it now if you'd like.
Trying to, I got the timeline right here,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like the purple stuff and the little back little corner right there.
So you're getting like those little bars, right?
Yeah, and the little dot.
So you're getting something that looks like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a little box there, and there's like.
We don't want to work in this environment, okay? Zach, here's where we got to go. Down at the bottom of that window, we want this button. Did you click on it? Convert to frame animation.
Okay.
And then I'm afraid, let's see. I'm afraid I might lose some work here. This will convert the timeline to frame animation. Yes. Okay, great. Now we're back. Okay, whoops. All right, so clearly we need some more frames of animation in here to continue to define and refine the movement, right? Because this isn't it. This isn't anywhere close to what it needs to be, right? I'm trying to create like a little bit of an arc here. I'm trying to create some sort of movement that illustrates what we're trying to accomplish here. One of the 12 principles of animation that we're going to be studying in this class is the principles of arcs. Arcs are an important element for everything that we create in the movement world. Everything moves in an arc. It might seem as though an object is traveling in a straight line, but it's always moving in an arc. Why are things always, always, always moving in an arc? Gravity. Gravity is the one thing that we can't turn off. It's always, always, always going to be working against us, depending on if your glass is half empty or half full. Okay? So we can't turn gravity off. Gravity is always going to be trying to pull our objects down to Mother Earth, so our objects are always going to be arced in their motion. Okay? Even things that seem linear, like the movement of a human body, when deconstructed, it's nothing more than a whole series of arcs. Okay? So I want my little ball to travel from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, but it needs to travel within an arc. Okay? So let's do that real fast. Now, as artists and animators, the one thing that we have to continue to do almost on every single project is be kind of like mad scientists, okay? We have to be like these really crazy engineers. We have to plan out our movements first, right? I'm a big fan of planning out all of our animation frames before we get started here. I need to create an arc. Yeah, we can use the pen tool. We're just going to use the brush tool. We're going to keep it very, very simple today, okay? There are other ways to get the accuracy that we need in consistent arcs, but we're going to keep it simple for our first time out, as basic as we can. I want to kind of plan out and create a master layout frame of where I want my animation to go, or where I want all of my frames to go. So I'm going to create a new layer here, and on that layer, I'm just going to paint. I always kind of do it with a light kind of cyan, and let's see here. Go into my brush, excuse me, and here we go. Let's just turn off the background. All right, so on this frame, I'm just going to draw an arc. Okay, now that's a really bad arc. I'm doing this in an environment that's very uncomfortable for me. Sometimes you have to draw it 8 or 9 times to get it to be somewhat consistent. There we go. That's close enough for government work. I think that's the best one I'm going to do with my crazy little Wacom tablet. Okay, that's the motion path that I want my sphere to go on. I now have a guide that tells me where to place all of my spheres along that motion path. So this is going to be the layout frame. This is going to help me figure out where I need to put all my subsequent frames to get me where I need to go. Okay? I'm very happy, actually. Very, very pleased. I think I may actually get a Cintiq monitor this semester. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Very, very pleased. I'll know in about a month if they've approved it or not. So I'll no longer have to do this disconnect with my hand. I can actually see what I'm drawing. That'll be nice. Okay. All right, so there's my layout frame. Now we can go ahead and start to plan out all of the other subsequent animation frames, because we've established the extremes, right? Now we're going to plot out where all those in-betweens need to go. So let's do it real fast. I'm going to take my first animation frame, and I would recommend doing this before. Let's close my window. Get it back. Mini bridge, go away. Mini bridge. Close tab group. There we go. Now, you're not going to get a real-time update of your animation. There we go. Why is it not showing me that frame? Yeah, that's okay. I'll delete it. Okay, this is something that I encourage folks to do. Hey, look, I did a pretty great job of figuring out the beginning and the end. Wow, I couldn't have planned that better. This is something that I would encourage you to do before you actually go into your animation palette and start planning all this stuff out. Yes, sir?
I accidentally pushed something that's like made all my tools disappear.
Was it the F key?
Probably.
Or the tab key?
Right, so I just pushed.
If you hit the tab key, all your... There you go. All right. So I recommend planning out all of your animations before you go into that animation window and start laying out all your frames. You should be able to get a good guesstimation of all of this beforehand. So let's just do it real fast. I have my frame 1, I got my frame last. Let's go in and start adding a whole bunch of other frames to establish the arc that I need to create. So I'm just going to duplicate some layers here. And now, so there's my extreme. There's the middle. I'll duplicate that one again. And I'm just going to add in one in between on either side. Something like that. Okay. And we're going to keep going, and we're going to continue to refine these in-betweens over a number of different passes. The more in-betweens that we have, the smoother the motion we're going to create. You saw earlier when I just had those 3 frames of animation, it felt very clicky. The movement felt very jagged and rough, and wasn't smooth. With 5 frames of animation, we're going to get a very, very different result. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so I'm going to go back into my animation window, back in my timeline, and let's just do it here. Now I did, let's see. Okay, on frame 1, we're going to see just that one. On frame 2, we want to see that guy. There we go. On frame 3, I want to turn off the old one. Go. And I want to create another frame of animation. There it is. And then the last one is going to be this dude chilling down here in the ground. Let's play it now, see what we get. Yeah. Now we're starting to get something that looks a little bit more compelling. It feels more complete. The movement feels a little bit more smooth, but we're still not where we need to be, right? So what do we need to do? Add more frames. Add more frames. The more frames of animation that define the movement, the smoother that movement's going to be, okay? In addition, it's also going to start to slow down our movement because now the ball is traveling a shorter distance between frames. This animation already starts to feel a little bit slower. Okay, let's go ahead and stop this. I want to close down this group and get back over here. All right. So, and I'm going to take a second and reorganize my layer stack here to stay on top of where all this needs to be. Because if you don't, trust me, if you don't stay organized, it's going to be bad for you.
What does it mean to tween animation frames?
We're not going to do that. Yeah. That's the computer automatically trying to figure out how to move it for us. Yeah.
I'm having something weird going on here. It's like, it's moving, okay. When I'm in a certain frame, layer 6 is in a certain place.
Yeah.
The object in layer 6, and then it moves depending on what frame I'm on. What do I do?
Okay.
Like, look. See, this is the same layer. It's layer 8.
Yep.
Showing up here and here in 2 different places.
Let's go back to the treble frame. Is it that one? So on that frame, which of these we want to see?
Well, we don't want to see that.
We just want to see
five.
frame 5. Okay, good.
Right, but-
That's now been preserved. So
Right,
go to
and now
frame.
When you're at frame 8 here, it's down here. But
Yep.
when you're up here, it moves. Why?
Go back. Go
Move
back.
it in one frame, it doesn't move
Yeah.
in the other frames.
It doesn't.
Unless you're on frame 1. That one's like the universal.
Yeah. You're basically preserving states of your layers palette on each frame of animation. Yeah.
None of my frames show up on the timeline.
Yeah, because you only have one animation frame. You need to create another one. You've created layers. Now we need to create frames.
All right.
Okay? Click on that one.
Oh.
All right, now we have 2 frames. Which on frame 1, which of these spheres do we want to see?
Which one?
Just that one, right? No, we'll go to frame 1.
Okay.
Now turn off everything but that bottom one. You're welcome. Rinse and repeat. Is everyone kind of getting it a little bit? Who said no? Mr. DeCampo? Question? What you got?
It's kind of hard. I was just trying to redo it, and
Well, what you got so far?
I don't know. Not so sure about that.
Okay,
was just trying
so
to
go to frame 1. Yep, there it is. Okay. Let's go to frame 1 in your animation. All right, so in frame 1, we see just this red sphere, right? Do we want to see the green line?
I do see the green line.
Do you want to see the green line in the animation?
No.
Yeah, turn it off. Now that's been saved, okay? Let's go to frame 2. Good, awesome. And go to, what do we want to see on frame 3?
I need to get rid of these.
Yep, and then probably the background, right?
Yes.
Turn on the background layer. Turn on that one. And then now the background, the one that's right below it. There we go. Now play it. Ta-da! Okay, we're getting there. Yes.
I get what you're saying. It's just that I have 2 balls in between each one of these points, and I named these really badly. I'm sorry, but the thing is, when I switch between these, I get it just preserves them in a really weird way. Like it doesn't preserve them at all.
Yeah, okay. So let's figure out which layer is screwing us up here.
Yeah, it's the frame 1 copy.
Frame what? Okay, so do we need to see that frame at this moment in time?
No, we don't. But here's the thing. It's a different layer. It's in a different point. I mean, it shifts to a different point depending on what frame I'm on. Like, that is not there at this point. Like, it's
It's off.
That's what I mean, though. That look.
Yeah, it will preserve the movement of it too.
But I didn't move it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I think just hard code it to make it work. You know, as long as it looks good where it needs to be on that frame, we're happy camper. Okay. Where it looks on those other frames, not a factor.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, you guys are getting it. Yeah, you know, what I would recommend is that you make all your animation layers first, kind of sketch it all out, and then go back in and do the timeline. Good, really good. Great job. I love how it bounces off. Brilliant. Brilliant questions? You've been watching? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. This kind of is a video layer. Kind of. Well, it's a video timeline. Maybe. I wasn't planning on, but I certainly could. Yeah. I'm trying to keep it as basic as I can. Say again? Background color. So that is purple, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah. So what we can do is we can go over here where it says edit.
edit.
Go ahead and fill. There we go. And then you can use the foreground color. See, it says use foreground color.
Two background colors.
Background color. Perfect. There it goes. Yeah.
Because if I turn off this one and everything turn on, but I saw only one of the ball. The balls I cannot see.
Yeah. You know, I was running into that problem a minute ago too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. What's on layer 4 copy?
Layer 4 copy over here.
That one. What's? Yeah. What's on? So you only have content.
Copy two. Yeah, they have ball over here.
Yeah, that's weird. That's very weird. In your back. Yeah. This may be a nuance in CC that's going to sink us.
Yeah.
Grr. Yeah, I got to figure that out. I don't know what's going on, Tam. I really don't know. I'm running into something very similar here on mine, where I know I have animation frames active. I mean, I should see my entire animation right now, but I'm only seeing the first 2 frames. And I don't know why that's doing that.
It's doing that. It's doing that to me too. Each frame of animation is a different. It's registering different things. So
Yeah, and we're preserving the states in. Okay, let me see if I can go into my timeline, my palette options here. No. Yeah, yeah. But in previous versions of Photoshop, if I close this tab, it would basically get us out of that animation mode, and it will allow me to continue to add frames and to continue to work outside of that animation environment. I should, right now, I'm going to go out and extrapolate and guess that Photoshop still thinks I'm on frame 2 of my animation, which is why I only see these 2 spheres, even though all of them are currently visible in my animation palette.
they moved also, by the way. 3 of those frames are now the same frame. That's why you can't see them anymore. You see the motion on them? That one's the same as.
Yes. I see what you're talking about.
That's what it did in the frame of animation that you're in. You never moved those. It was in a different frame of animation. So if you move over to another frame,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. No, I get you.
Move stuff, you have to make sure you're in the first frame.
Yep. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to delete all of my frames of animation. And I'm going to get out of here.
If you're in any frame but frame 1, and you move something, it only moves it in that frame.
Yeah. So this is the insanity. I only have 1 frame of animation right now. I hate it when Adobe changes things and they don't tell me. How dare they? I have a hunch. I have a big hunch that I know Adobe is trying to force me to do. They are really trying to force me to work in this environment. But still, let's just get the visibility down.
Wait, play it again. I want to see.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Fantastic. It also doesn't help that three of those frames are the same frame.
Yeah. Here, let me do that. Maybe I'm confusing myself here. Let me close this tab. I'm going to keep that. See, this is what drives me crazy. Yeah. Gosh. This used to be so easy. Well, this is frustrating. Does anyone know how to delete a video track? Because I think that's what's going on.
It should all be gone now, right?
Yeah, this is what is really driving me absolutely crazy. Is I got a video track, so my frames are only going to show up when my playhead goes on front of them, right? I want to delete all of that and just get it back.
No, you put the layer in the background or delete that layer. You can exit out of it, right?
When you go into video mode, your layers become video.
Video. How do I get them back to layers, though?
I think you just have to go back to the frame animation.
What if I want to just not even do that? Yeah. It's like I just want to get them back to layers. I don't have any interest right now of getting them back to videos or frames of animation. I just want to get my Photoshop document back.
URL
Just go to your history panel and go back.
Yeah. Well, I've done so much stuff right now that I only get to right there. Yeah. I hate it when Adobe changes things. Grr. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do as an alternative to keep the ball moving as I bang my head against this for the next period of time, because we're running out of time and I want to keep moving forward. Earlier I mentioned that one of the best ways to work when you're animating is to plan everything out first and make these layout frames. I passed around the layout frame for the bouncing ball earlier, right? Did you guys see that? I think maybe only this half of the room saw it. But here's what I want you to do for your homework this week. Don't worry about animating it, okay? I just want you to draw it. That's all I want you to do is to draw it, okay? Yeah, draw a whole bunch of balls. This is what I... Then you're done.
No, draw that. He wants us to draw the map, basically.
Yeah, I want you to draw what's called the layout frame, okay? This is the layout. This represents your entire animation in one frame, okay? And then we'll figure out how to change Photoshop. Here, I'll pass it around. I think this side of the room didn't get a chance to see it. It's just a blueprint. That's all it is. It's also in your books. It's also in your books. This isn't something that you can't have access to. It's everywhere, okay? I want you to plot it out. Yeah, I want you to plot it out. And then I'll figure out why Photoshop is choosing to rebel against me and make my day a little bit less fun. One other thing that I would recommend that you do, and this is something that I've done since day one in my animation career, is plot out your arcs. Okay, plot out the motion paths. It's often difficult to conceptualize where your sphere needs to go, but if you just plot out where the general path is, the process of animation becomes a whole lot easier. Okay, those two documents, and I'll pass it around just so everyone can get a chance to check it out. Those two documents really make the process of animation a whole lot easier because you've already created the blueprint, right? You've already engineered it from kind of a 10,000-yard description. Now we're just at the execution stage.
I know you said you just have to draw it, but I've already done my entire animation, so how do I save video?
Well, hold on. Let's just save your Photoshop document. All that stuff will be preserved in your Photoshop document. Okay? Yeah.
Save it as a Photoshop file itself, though. You know, so that way it can be reopened or something, and not just be a flat image.
Yeah. You got it. You got it. And actually, the best way to get it out is to not save it for web, because what's that going to make? GIFs. Where do you see GIFs? Only on the internet, right? It's not a broadcast medium. It's not something you can publish to Facebook. Well, actually, you probably can. It's not something you can put on YouTube, okay? It's not something you can put on Vimeo. It is not, and I need to underscore this. It is not a professional animation medium, okay? Is not. It angers me that Tumblr, and it's all Tumblr's fault, man. The GIF was dead. The GIF was dead for like 10 years, and I was happy that the GIF was dead, right? Because it's a piece of crap format. It really is. And then Tumblr, in all their glory, decided to bring it back.
Hey, Tumblr's where I met a lot of my art friends.
I don't have a problem with the social network, but I don't like the technology. GIFs are horrible. GIFs are horrible, okay? They're bad. We want to make movies. And if you're really committed to making movies...
I use Adobe After Effects.
You know, okay. I mentioned this yesterday. And I'm going to mention it again. The fastest way, and I mean the fastest way to get on my bad side is to interrupt me. It's my pet peeve. I will let you talk. Just let me talk. Okay? My sentences are not that long. Just let me talk. So if you would like to render your animation, if you've wrangled Photoshop and you're smarter than I, which I'm sure a number of you guys are, go File, Export, Render to Video. Render to Video, okay? It's really, really easy. At the conclusion of that process, now unfortunately my animation is not going to give me much of a result, okay? But check it out. So once you're done, and this is not something I'm expecting you to do, render to video, okay? Just use the MP4 preset. Initializing video export. Because I'm live streaming this, it's going to take a merry old time. Where'd that layout frame go to? Dylan's got it. Okay. Render to video. Render to video. So here's what, if you're at that stage where you got your animation to work, just under the format here, just choose H.264. Okay. H.264. Make sure you know where you're saving it. Okay. The select folder option right here is going to allow you to determine where that file is saved to your hard drive. However, probably 90% of you guys aren't at this point, and we'll continue to explore this over the course of the next week. Okay, the process of animation, the physical process of creating the frames, getting the frames to move, is all of about a 5-minute process. Okay, that doesn't actually take a whole lot of work. Drawing the animation is really where we need to spend all of our time. Okay, everyone clear as to what we're going to be doing for our homework?
Drawing bowls.
We're going to be drawing the bouncing ball, okay? Use the breakdown, the layout from the book as an example of how to create it. Arcs, 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 okay? It's all about arcs, okay? It's all about arcs. Are you finished with this? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
So for our homework assignment, it's about bouncing more than once, correct?
Correct.
So it cannot be what we just did right now.
Correct. Well, it may not qualify for the details of the assignment. So let's talk about the details of the assignment. It's been sitting on the blog for quite some time. There are a number of parameters that you're going to need to consider as you start to work towards the completion of this assignment. Let's go check it out real fast. Okay, so if you go back to the class blog, I posted the assignment last week, and hopefully a number of you guys spent some time checking it out. All right, so let's just take a look at the details. These are the things that I need you to do. Okay. So, your ball must bounce at least 3 times. Got to get 3 bounces in there. The animation must demonstrate the correct applications of arcs. Don't worry about squash and stretch. We'll talk about that again next week in a little bit more detail, okay? We didn't necessarily have all the time today to get to squash and stretch. We'll talk about squash and stretch, okay? Actually, I think next week I'm going to lecture on all 12 of the principles of animation and give you guys some really solid examples of what each one of them look like. By going through the examples in your book, you should get a good idea of what we're trying to accomplish, okay? Please include some indication of a ground plane, okay? You know, I would like to see your ball bouncing on something. We need to have a point of reference as to what this thing looks like inside of a scene to really draw context to the movement, all right? Animation must be at least 40 frames. 40 frames to figure out how many times or, how many frames you need per bounce, okay? But it's got to be at least 40 frames of animation. The animation size in your Photoshop document is going to be 1280 by 720. That was what we were using before. And when you're finished, if you want to go and render out your video, you're more than welcome to. You can use a .mov, but I think the preset in CC now is .mp4. That's fine. It's the exact same thing on the format side, so either will work. Okay. Questions as to the expectations? Yes.
The surface that the ball bounces off of, you just use like the edge of the frame. Is that okay?
Nope. Ground plane. Ground plane. Got to have a ground plane on there. Got to have a ground plane. Questions? I've even given you a really great example of what these projects look like. I feel a little bad because I ranted and raved about GIFs and then I embed one on my website. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If you want it, we're going to talk about squash and stretch next week, okay, in detail. Because there's a lot of elements about squash and stretch that I can't cover in the next 30 minutes because we only got about 30 minutes left in class, okay? Your book covers it in great detail. I'm going to cover it again in detail next week. This is just our first animation, so don't worry about it. We got a lot left in front of us. We have a lot of opportunities over the next couple of weeks to really dig through all this stuff. Okay? So there's a great example of what we're striving to complete here. All right. Okay, a couple things. For this next week's homework, since we didn't quite get to the actual animation part, here's what I want you to do. If you're at the stage where all of your frames of animation have been drawn and you can't figure out the animation side, and if you were like me who it just wasn't working at a fundamental level, all I need you to do is just to submit the Photoshop document. That Photoshop document, the PSD, is going to include all of your animation frames in it, or at least all of your layers in it, and I should be able to very quickly open it up and see the motion path and the movement that you've crafted. It's not going to be moving, it's going to be static, but at the very least we'll be able to draw it and get a good example of what it would look like if it were everything animated. Okay? Sound good? And if you can get it to work, good for you. Awesome. Awesome. Submit the MP4 or the .mov. I've included the naming convention that I would like you to follow going forward. So everything has to be named correctly in here. Okay? Here's what you need to do. What are you going to do what's the first thing that you're going to put in your file? Your last name. Don't put last name. Okay? Someone did that last semester, and it was kind of one of those facepalm moments where I was like, okay, no, it's your last name. Your last name in here, not just the word last name. I saw someone literally just copy and paste that without thinking about it into their file name and submit it before I could say anything last semester. No, but your last name, okay? This is going to go, this is really, really, really going to help me make sure I'm grading these things within a reasonable amount of time. I have a lot of media on my side that I have to manage. If things are not named correctly, I'm not going to know whose assignment it is and if you did it or not. So please make sure you're putting your name on it. Okay?
And then, of course, we're making another Photoshop animation from scratch, right?
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking about recycling, my Photoshop thing, and make it do 3 bounces instead of 2 as it did today.
That sounds good.
Right?
That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. Now, it's not the only thing that we're going to do. There's one other thing that I would like you to do this week, and we have some time in class to kind of knock this one out of the park. It shouldn't take us too long. Here's what I want us to do. And this lab exercise is purely designed just to get us working inside of Photoshop. Okay, this is the good old screen direction thing. I need you to draw something, and the example down below is a good one. Going from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and then back again, kind of like what I was doing earlier with that little silly ball. Just do the animation frames. Just do the layout. Okay, don't worry about getting them to move within the screen. We'll handle that in class next week. There's a couple other things in here that I would like you to do. What? It's a little boomerang. It works. You can be creative. It doesn't have to be stupid blocks, okay? Have fun with this. Put your own fingerprint on all these designs. This is supposed to be a fun, creative class, okay? So have fun with it. In addition to an object moving within the screen, you also need to have some sort of background, okay? A background that you make. It can be anything that you want, okay? Just have fun with the brushes in Photoshop and make something, okay? And make something. Doesn't have to be award-winning artwork, but at the very least you understand the context of the boomerang in relationship to the background, okay? Just make something. Have fun with it. It's just getting our hands dirty with this stuff. For our first time out, it's just about getting into the application and making stuff. We'll get better at it over the next couple of weeks, okay? Yeah? Okay. Couple details about the lab assignment. Your object must travel from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and then back to the original starting location. So think of it like a yo-yo, okay? Left, right, back to the left, okay? Please include the background element that does not move. So this is going to be a static element, okay? You're going to be drawing at least 30 frames of this bad boy. And it's going to be 1280 by 720, okay? Just do the layout for this entire animation over the next week and we'll be good. Yes, sir?
To clarify, so it has to go from the left side of the screen to the right side and back to the left?
You got it.
Not the other way around?
It can go the other way around. If it goes right, left, right, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
So circle the screen, in other words.
Yeah, you got it. You're the first person that's ever asked, can it go from the right to the left? And I get like, yeah, of course, absolutely.
That's because I'm playing with something and I started.
That's okay. That's good. Shoot, it can even go from the top to the bottom to the top again. I mean, the orientation of the animation does not really make a difference here. So have fun with it.
So how do you save this?
So good question by Mr. DeCampo here. So how to save a Photoshop document? Go back into Photoshop. It's really easy, Chris. Just go to the top of the screen where it says File
I know that.
and Save.
Why not the save as?
You could use Save As. Yeah. Both will yield you the result that we're after. A Photoshop document that contains all of your work. That PSD, the Photoshop document, is the most important thing inside of your thumb drive net right now because it contains all of your work. Okay?
Okay, so if I save it into pictures, or do I have to save it onto pictures or onto video?
I would save it to the desktop or to a thumb drive that you've brought with you so that you can bring this home with you.
Okay, the desktop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can see that you have the thumb drive in your machine right now. You can also save it directly to your thumb drive.
So save it as last name or
Mm-hmm. Last name. You got it?
where did you show the last name?
It's on the renderography blog.
The render?
Yeah.
Is it in the Safari?
It is, yep, web browser. Okay, questions on what we're going to be doing? Yeah, Rob.
Trying to save this to export the video,
Mm-hmm.
and for quite some time.
Is it rendering? Is it just going slow? Yeah.
About 60%, 55% of the way across and has not moved.
That's not surprising. That's
Okay.
not surprising. That is
Yours goes a little faster.
yeah, that's not surprising. It should do it. Should do it, hopefully.
Because I tried it on the one that I made earlier when you showed me too, and I finally just had to say forget it so I could use it.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So it really was stuck, huh?
Yeah, it gets to like it goes to right away to there.
Yeah.
It just kind of hangs out for a long time.
Interesting. Okay. Give us some more time and see what happens. Yeah. I've learned with computers you have to be very, very patient. Okay.
Where's this particular on the screen?
Mm-hmm. It's on renderography under the GCOM 400 section, and it's in the first blog post that's on the stream. Yeah, let me go back one page so everyone has a point of reference as to what we're talking about. So go to Classes, GCOM 400, and then Principles of Animation right there. Yeah, it's in the Homework and the Lab tabs. That's where I was just at. Yes, sir.
I don't think I caught this, but did you want us to try and on paper or on the
Draw on Photoshop. Draw on Photoshop. You certainly could draw it on paper, but eventually it's going to have to get into a Photoshop document one way. So if you wanted to draw it on paper and then like scan each frame, I'm cool with that.
So that's separate from the actual
No, yeah. ARCS is just a layer that's going to help you plan out where all those spheres are going to need to go.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, other questions? Next week.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything's done in Photoshop. Both the homework and the lab are due by the beginning of the next class. Okay. And remember, the expectations, since we had an epic fail this afternoon with Photoshop CC, is just to do the layout. Okay. So you're still going to draw each layer, and in each layer, your sphere is going to be in its appropriate place. If all the layers are turned on, you should see the entire animation in one thing, exactly like this, okay? This is what we are going for the bouncing ball. This is it, okay? If you can get the animation to work, thumbs up. If you can't get the animation to work, that's no biggie. That's no biggie. I'm going to figure out why CC in CS6 is not performing the way it used to work in CS5. So I got to figure that out over the next week. That was something that was unexpected as I came into class today. So we're just going to keep moving. I'm not going to let technology hold me back. Questions on what we're doing? Everyone understand? All right, so we got about 30 minutes left in class. Use this time to start working on your lab and your homework. All right? Hold on 2 seconds, Zach.